Package configurations supply property values to objects within the package at runtime. You can use configuration settings for virtually all objects from control flow tasks to variable values. Integration services packages are hierarchical, so to specify an object property in a configuration, you need to specify the path through the hierarchy to the property. Every container is a node in the hierarchy. In this context, each object is a container of some type. So there's a few rules that you use to build the path string. The starting node for the path is always /package. That's a fixed string. Then a dot identifies the beginning of a property name. A backslash identifies the beginning of a container name. And then square bracket containers enclose collection items. So let's look at an example of this. So this image shows a file system task named file operation nested within a for each loop container named file loop. The path string to access the operation name property of that file operation or the file system task starts with /package /file loop /file operation dot properties, that's another fixed string, so it's always dot properties, and then in square brackets, operation name. All right, so again, the path starts with a fixed string package, and again, that's literally the string package, it's not the name of the package, followed by the file loop and file operation containers, and moving down the hierarchy of objects. Operation name is the member of the properties collection of file operation. So that's why it's that notation. So as you can see, the path reflects the structure of the package designer, drilling down into child objects and their properties. Fortunately, you seldom need to build the path strings manually, but understanding how to form path strings will be beneficial when you read configuration files. All right, let's talk about configuration storage. Package configurations are stored as strings with several different storage options. XML files. So XML configuration files are probably the most popular method of storing configuration data. They can store multiple configured properties in a single file, which makes them really convenient. The deployment process is as simple as copying the file and notifying the package where to find it. In addition, multiple packages can share an XML file. And XML files are saved by default with an extension of .dtsconfig. However, configuration files are not required to use this extension. By naming it with an XML extension, you can use your favorite XML editor, including SQL Server Data Tools and Visual Studio, to more easily view and change the file. SQL Server. You can store configurations within a SQL Server database table. The configurations table requires a specific schema to store configuration data. The configuration editor creates the schema automatically when you set up a configuration that uses SQL Server storage. And for details on the table schema, you can refer to SQL Server books online. Now, if you need to centralize multiple configurations that packages on multiple servers use, SQL Server Storage is probably the best choice. SQL Server Storage simplifies access to the configurations by multiple servers. In contrast, to use an XML file across servers, you'd need to arrange for a shared file location that each server can access. That can be more involved and challenging than saving the configurations to a central database as long as that database is accessible to all of the servers that need to use it. Another option is the registry. You can store configurations in the Windows registry under HKey current user. Each registry key can store one property value. And the last option is environment variables. Environment variables can each hold one property value. You can also use them in conjunction with other configuration storage types to form indirect configurations, which you'll learn about a little bit later. Here I have an existing control flow project that I'm going to modify to use configurations. As you can see, it has a single package, You can take a look at it there, control flow vars. And it contains a for each loop and a script task. Okay, and what it does really isn't important. It just reads some files within the project directory. Okay, so now here I'm going to click on the package outside of any of the control flow tasks and go over to the properties window. And I need to find the configurations property, which is part of this miscellaneous catalog. I'll click on the ellipsis button, and this opens up the package configuration organizer. So the first thing to note is that package configurations are not enabled. So that's the default for a new integration services project. You have to explicitly enable configurations in order to use them. So I'll go ahead and do that, and that enables the rest of the controls on the page. By the way, there used to be a way to open this dialog box from the SSIS menu, but for some reason that's known apparently only to Microsoft, that was removed around the release of SQL Server 2014. So you have to go into the properties of the package like I did to open up this dialog box. So again, if you've used this feature in the past and are looking for it in the same place, you won't find it until you've enabled it, which is kind of strange. Okay, so I need to add a configuration, so I'll click on the Add button, and that fires off the Package Configuration Wizard. So you can read the nice welcoming message and move on to the next page. So here's where you can select the configuration type. I'm going to keep the default of XML configuration, but there are the other ones that I talked about as well. And then I need to provide a location for the configuration file. So I'll click on Browse, and by default that puts me in the project directory. I'm actually going to go up a folder, make it a little bit easier to find. And the name that I'm going to give it is myconfig. And notice that it's going to end up with an extension of .dts config. And I'll click on Save, and that configures that text box. Okay. Oh, and by the way, if I wanted to store the location in an environmental variable, you can do that as well. That's an indirect configuration. Okay, so I click Next, and here's where I can select the properties that I want to save within the configurations file. So the way this works is I specify the properties of different tasks and components within the package. This saves the initial value to the configurations file so that when I run this package, it'll read those property values from the configurations file and then update the properties of the objects within the package to those values. All right, for some reason it opens way down low in this, so I'll go up to the top here. All right, so here's the package name, control flow vars, and I want to go down into executables, into the for each loop container and expand that, and the enumerator properties, I'll expand that, because I want to specify the directory and file spec names here. Okay, so those are the two properties that I'm going to provide values for within the configuration. So what this is going to do is it's going to save the folder in which the loop is going to search for files and the file extension, and it's going to save those values to the configuration file. And it'll initially use the current values in the package. Okay, so I'm going to check the directory here because I want to make sure source data, variables, samples, and actually I can expand this to make this a little bit easier to read. Okay, I need to change that path just a little bit. So I'll come over here to Windows Explorer, and I have the packages and the control flow start, and that's the actual path that I want to use. And actually it's not going to let me save it, right? So I'm going to cancel out of this. I'm going to close this, and I need to configure this container to use the path there. Okay, so I should have done that before I... Oh, and actually not control flow start. I actually need it from where the files are located, which is source data, right there. Okay. All right, so now I can go in, and by the way, I'll show you that there is no option here for configurations at this point. So I once again need to go into the properties of the package, configurations, and click on the box right there. Okay. All right, so click Add, start this over again, browse to the location where I want the file. I'll once again go up one level and name this my config, and I'll use the extension .dtsconfig, which is the default, and save that. Click on Next, and then come back up here and go down to the for loop container and executables and the script task. No, sorry, for the for each loop container. And I want the enumerator properties. There we go. And again, I want the directory and file spec. So if I expand this again and look at directory, it's now, yes, it's got the source data. Okay, great. Okay, so now I'll continue on. And here's where I can name this configuration. This becomes part of the package, so I want to give it something meaningful, a meaningful name. So I'm going to call this loop configuration, because I can have multiple configurations within a single package. Okay, so this identifies it's associated with properties of that loop. Okay, and so you can see here are the properties that I'm going to save using the full path, using that format I talked about, \package/foreachloopcontainer .foreachenumerator .properties file spec and directory. And I can select additional properties if I want to save them in the configuration file as well, but that'll do for now. And I'll click on Finish, and that creates that XML configuration file. Okay, I'm done with the organizer, so I'll click OK to save that, and I'll save changes to the project. So let's go take a look at that configuration file. I'll go to File, Open File, and here I placed it within that root directory there. I'll open up DTS, the DTS Connect file. Notice that it does recognize it as an XML file, even though I didn't give it a file name with the extension XML. I'll do a Control-KD to format the file to make it a little bit easier to read. Okay, and so if you look through the file, you can easily find the two different properties that I'm saving, the directory and the file spec, along with their initial values. So I have C, sample files, packages, source data, and star.txt, which is the file mask.